Hello, I'm Ron Knapik from Knapiks Marine in Amsterdam, New York. I'm in my dealership's technician room, which is located in our service department. Today, we're going to take a look at some water pumps, and I will give my analysis of what each pump did or did not do. So let's get started. The first pump we're going to take a look at here is out of an outboard that had 197 hours on it, and it was in operation for 5 seasons and 3 months of an additional season. And the customer decided it was time to bring it in for maintenance and have the water pump replaced. Now, as we can see on the impeller, it's really not squished or formed down a lot. The ears are still pliable on the impeller. There's no sign of burning, any cracking or anything. The plate surface has no rubber scoring on it, and the cup also has no rubber from the impeller scored around it. Also, the air vent right here is not clogged, and these can get clogged either by sealant during installation or some serious debris that just happens to stick into it, but that's rare. Generally, these vent holes get plugged during installation by using excessive sealant. And so the vent was working, the impeller did its job, and this was a good functioning impeller. The customer had no problems, no soft overheat warnings, or any other problems of any type. These pumps have become very efficient to produce a lot of water flow and maintain a good pressure to the cooling system. And whenever they make these efficient, the amount of heat from friction increases. So these pumps, especially in your newer outboards these days, the pumps do need water, and they need a constant source of water so damage doesn't occur. So, like I said, this did its job. This little vent hole, when the boat and motor is backed into the water, the air goes out of that vent hole and allows the pump cavity to fill up immediately. So as soon as that engine is started, it has a full pump full of water. Also, under operation, should any air get into the pump cavities, the air can bleed out quickly and keep a good supply of water to this pump, which is not only needed for proper cooling of the outboard, but it's also needed to eliminate friction burn. Now, this next pump, it's the same part number as the previous pump we looked at. But what we notice on this, there's definitely pieces of the impeller broken off, definitely brittle, burnt, scored. And there's a lot of rubber that's been transferred to the cup area and also to the bottom plate. So that indicates that this impeller was running without proper water to cool it. In fact, you'll notice also right down here on the plastic housing here, it actually got so hot that it melted the impeller housing, and you can't even get the cup out of here, I don't think. Nope, you can't. It's actually sealed right in there with melted impeller housing material. Now, what we did on this, we took a look at the engine report And what we noticed on this engine here, as I mentioned, it was in service for less than a year and only had about 15 hours of running time on it. The report also indicated that it had one soft overheat. In other words, it did not overheat to a great degree because it went into safe mode and it reduced the RPMs, and the owner knew enough at that point to bring it in to have it checked out. It did have a soft overheat. In other words, an overheat around just around 200 degrees. And it just happened at one time, so there were no previous overheats where this engine was constantly going into to an overheat situation. Upon questioning the customer, he was of old school type, and basically what he was doing, and a lot of us used to do it on the older outboards, you don't want to do it on new outboards, is he would momentarily hit the start button on this engine at his house to make sure it would crank over before he went to the lake. The only thing, these newer outboards start so quick, as soon as you hit that button, it's running. By the time you shut it off, it runs for a second. And just that amount of this impeller spinning in there over the course of time, him test starting it at the house, caused the friction between the impeller and the liner to cause a lot of heat, melting the impeller. Once the rubber melts on that liner, it of course only gets worse. It doesn't get better. And it got to the point where it put the engine into a safe mode, reduced RPMs. But that's the situation on this water pump. It was test starts at the house prior to going to the lake. And as we know, we do not want to do that. Okay, our next pump, again, same part number, out of a different engine. Scenario's a little different on this. Now, as you can see, this looks like brand new. Everything except the impeller. What happened in this case, this engine had about a little over 7 hours of running time on it, and went into an overheat situation. And that was it. Customer tried restarting it again, and again it went into a safe mode, RPM reduction, and there was no water coming out of the stream indicator. So he brought it in, and what we found was what looked like a brand new pump, plate, cup, the vent hole, air vent hole is not plugged, and matching it up in the housing, everything fits right in and everything is perfect. But look at that impeller, every ear is missing. This is a simple one. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have a defective impeller. Now on this pump, this is out of a larger outboard, as you can tell. This pump was doing its job. The impeller is not formed down. Still got a lot of life in that impeller. The plate was wearing good. Everything looks good. The vent hole was open, and we checked out this whole pump, and it's definitely was it's a good pump, and it was doing its job. Customer brought it in for service. It was 6 years in service, with only 151 hours on it. But that's what a good working pump should look like right there. Now next, everybody's going to recognize this probably. This is a seawater pump out of a stern drive. And that is basically what it's supposed to look like in a normal operation period. Now because of the friction that's created by this amount of blade surface into a stainless cup and plate, they recommend, well, up here in the Northeast, we recommend, you know, taking care of these maybe every 3 or 4 years. This one actually came out of a 5-year-old Bravo 3, and it looked nice and pretty. Customer took care of it. He never cranked it while it was out of water. In fact, I don't think he's ever ran this on a flushette, to be honest with you. We've taken care of the service on it. On the other extreme, we have one here that the customer managed to make 14 years on the same impeller. The only thing, this is what it looked like. There's the seal. There's the hub, and there's the impeller. And needless to say, he did get into about a 210 degree on the gauge overheat. But he was watching, he didn't ignore it, and we had to, we were able to replace the impeller and the seal and put this right back in service. And again, if you get a warning on your boat, whether it's a reduced RPM warning, an overheat light, the gauge starts running hotter than normal, instead of running around 160, 165, you notice it's starting to run around 180, 190. It's really time to bring it in before this happens, because if the customer wasn't paying attention or somebody was driving that really didn't know better, they could have really turned this into a major problem with the rest of the cooling system components and the engine. Well, we had the opportunity to look at quite a few different water pump scenarios. Before we leave today, I would just like to remind you that if it comes time for you to change your water impeller or water pump on your outboard or stern drive, I do recommend using nothing but genuine factory branded parts. And as I mentioned in my upcoming video, I will do some reasons why you should use branded parts and not third-party parts. But either way, when you get your water pump home, before you do the job, before you grab the first wrench, I recommend you take the installation guide that comes with this water pump. Identify your engine properly so you can reference what pertains to the engine you're working on, and to read this installation booklet from front to back before you even start, and then have it and use as a guide while you install your water pump. I'm Ron Knapik from Knapiks Marine in Amsterdam, New York, and I can be reached at ron@knapiksmarine.com. And thank you for watching my video today.